life as we know it is actually fading. The image that we think we live in is actually fading. But people can't see it because they are so conditioned just to see that image of life. For example, this consumer society with all its values and all its motor cars and everything that by which we define our life. The light is beginning to be withdrawn from it. The energy, the deep, deep energy of life is no longer in those images, which is why they lack a certain substance, they lack a certain meaning, they lack a certain magic, if you like. And coming out of the invisible world is a completely different civilization, is a completely different way to live. The difficulty always is the transition between one image and a new image. It is, people talk about changing the dream, but it is how do you shift from one image that is fading away to another image that has not yet come into the manifest world, but is already, the archetypes have changed. Anybody who works very deep in the archetypal world, I was shown that, 25 years ago when I first started working in the archetypal world, I was actually spent a year in the unconscious, in the archetypal world. Every day I was taken down into the archetypal world and they spoke to me. They actually trained me about depth psychology. I was taught by the archetypes themselves. And they showed me how they were changing, and I did a whole series of journeys I used to take people on in the archetypal world. And they explained deeper how the old patterns had changed. The difficulties, I say, is a time of transition, because the present image of life, the numinosity, what gives it meaning, what makes it really alive, is actually being withdrawn. There's not much light left there anymore, even though people don't notice it, because they're so conditioned just to see what they're used to seeing. There are two, as far as I can see at the moment, there are two ways to make that transition. One is that old way fades and the darkness comes. All the light goes and the darkness comes. And this is what, in history, you can see a little bit of a reflection of this, of what happened at the end of the Roman Empire, which had been around for about 600-700 years, and it stopped functioning. And in England, they didn't actually have roads again like that for 1,000 years. There was what's called the Dark Ages came after that. And civilization regressed. And that is one possibility, that the darkness will come. We're not really prepared how to live in darkness. We don't know how to live in darkness. We are like children, we are afraid of the dark. And this is when that deeper darkness comes, because the lights go out. One by one the lights go out. And then the darkness is present. And then out of the darkness, there will still remain pockets of light around the world, because there have to be, but very little. There's very little left now, even now. And then out of that darkness, out of maybe, it could be 60 years, it could be 300 years, then the energy of the archetypes that has been reconstellated will begin to manifest. And the new era will come into being out of the darkness. Or there is a possibility, and this is what I am working towards and other people are working towards, to make a transition from one era into another. That there can be a way that darkness does not have to obliterate everything. That we don't have to regress, like happened after the end of the Roman Empire, into Dark Ages. That there can be a way that the archetypes and the new energy can be welcomed into creation. It's very different. People have no understanding of how different it is, because it just works very differently. It's a different age, it's a different time. Everything works differently. How there can be a transition so that as one society dies, a new society can be born. This is becoming more and more difficult to do. When I first came to America 20 years ago, it was much more possible. And it also has to do with the destiny of this country, because this country has a particular role to play in the world which it hasn't embraced. If you're a really good musician and you're playing some dance music, if you add a new note to it, the people dancing will start to dance in a different way, even unconsciously. They will be drawn into a different rhythm, a different note. And if the love that is present in creation has a different note, then the archetypes will instinctively respond. They already are responding. The real problem is whether human consciousness will go along with it, or human consciousness will stay with the image of a civilization that is already over. And then it will be a very difficult time. And nobody really seems to be aware of that. They look at the ecological situation, but that is just a reflection of something else. The world will survive. The world has been through many traumas. That is not the problem. It is whether there is enough willingness in human consciousness to make a certain transition, or whether we have to lose everything first. And that is undecided. The archetypes are very, very powerful, but we've forgotten how to work with them. And sadly, a lot of what is... I said earlier how even the energy of the gods has been kind of censored, because anybody who has really encountered an archetype, they are incredibly powerful. They're not part of your personal psyche. They're not part of your personal story. They are the gods and goddesses. They don't necessarily behave very well either, as you read in the Greek myths. And we have kind of personalized them too. We've made our own little gods and goddesses, which is a dangerous game to play in the long run. So it seems that although, particularly in California, in the Western consciousness, there is a little bit of an awakening to the fact that there are these gods and goddesses. We don't really know how to be with them. And so, there will be a new civilization, but whether it's in 30 years' time or 300 years' time is a question mark. And I used to think everything was written, but I realize now it's a little bit more fluid. Some things are going to happen, yes, but humanity is very obstinate. And it's amazing, we can get stuck in old psychological patterns, we all know that, but to see us caught in the grip of an unsustainable fantasy about life is very bizarre. And particularly when what's coming is so much nicer. It is like everybody's hanging on to a really bad dream. But I guess that's what they want to do. Human beings have their own free will. Yeah? And one thing I should add, which is, I don't normally talk about, but as in a way, the space opens up, it does also attract certain forces of darkness. And just as we've forgotten how to work with the light, we've also forgotten how to work with the darkness. We don't have the right respect for darkness. And that's just also one of our hubris. We thought humanity thinks it is the king. And so we've forgotten how to work with the other world. Yes?